Good morning and welcome to ValueSelling Associates' first complimentary webinar of 2016. My name is Julie Thomas and I am going to be your guide through this content this morning, and we're going to talk about territory management, how to kickstart your year. And judging by the attendance of today's topic, we have hit a hot button because this is very well attended and highly registered for webinar this morning. So I'm excited to talk to you about this. Yesterday, someone in the office shared with me a really interesting quote, and I thought it was a great way to address what we're going to talk about today. And the quote is from an old Chinese proverb, and it goes like this: if we do not change our direction, we will likely end up where we are headed. And territory management plays into that because it's all about making sure we're headed in the right direction. And the way we do that in our sales territories is through a couple of activities that we're going to highlight this morning: goal setting, time management, and then segmentation. And those are the buttons that we're going to touch on this morning as we go through today's session. The audio today is streaming only. There is not an audio bridge available this morning, so hopefully you have all connected with your speakers and your headsets. And today's session is being recorded, so both the recording and the slides will be made available to you later today from valueselling.com, and I'll talk about that. At the end of today's session, I'll be happy to address any questions that come up. And I have two pieces of information to share with you at the end of today's session. One of them is an offer for you, and another one is about an event that Value Selling will be participating in that's coming up that I want to make sure that everybody's aware of. So let's get started. I've got a little word puzzle that I'm putting up here. And if you could look at your Q&A tab and see if you can answer, what do these words represent? What's the puzzle here that we are that you can answer with this? And type this into your Q&A panel, and I'll see what we've got. Let's see. I see investing it. I see a few other ideas. No one's really getting it. So let me go ahead and share with you what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about invest in doing it right. That's what those words represent to us in this little puzzle. Invest in doing it right. And that is what management, and in particular territory management, is all about. It's about having a plan, managing to that plan, and managing to that plan also involves oftentimes adjusting that plan. This isn't a static exercise. Hopefully these are some of the tips and tools that we're going to share with you today are things that you'll revisit not just at the beginning of the quarter, not just at the beginning of the year, but throughout the time period so that you can assess what's working and refine that plan so that you can take action on it. As I mentioned, we're going to talk about a number of aspects of territory management. At a high level, we're going to talk about goal setting, time management, and segmentation. But all of these things play into what territory management is. And it was interesting, I did a quick Google search as I was preparing for today's session, and I found a myriad of definitions for territory management, all from how do you cluster your accounts in a geography to maximize your efficiency or minimize your travel time, to how you prioritize within those accounts and prospects where you're spending the time based on what you perceive or estimate to be the highest potential. We're going to touch on a number of those different things, but it was very interesting that there doesn't seem to be a single comprehensive agreed upon definition for what territory management is. Ideally, I think territory management is all about looking at the coverage area that you are responsible as a sales rep and identifying how to be most effective and efficient at creating business, closing business in that territory in a specific period of time. And so that's the definition that we're going to be kind of working on today, both efficiency and effectiveness in your given defined territory. So what we're going to talk about today is kind of looking at the basics of territory management, all with the goal of getting you started in the right direction. I'm assuming many of you are joining us today because it's the beginning of your next fiscal year, or maybe it's the beginning of a new quarter for your organization. Many of you likely have a different territory this year than you did last year, and you may be in the process of getting your arms around how to attack that territory and where you should be spending your time. So we're going to focus on how to get started on that, with the purpose of focusing on how do we be really smart about this so that we're not just busy, we're effective. We don't want to necessarily work harder, we want to work smarter. And we're going to talk about the preparation that goes into this goal setting and time management and segmentation so that we can ultimately get better at business development, which includes prospecting and opening up those accounts to conversations so that we have the opportunity to determine whether or not there's a need for our products and services. So let's real quickly get a feel for who's on the line here. And I am going to open up a quick poll and ask you to pick which one of these best describes the type of territory do you have. Do you focus on a global account, or do you have just a specific named set of accounts? Do you focus on a geography, or are you a channel partner that maybe focuses on a specific industry or specific area as a channel partner? But let's see, who do we have on the line and what types of territories are represented on this. And I'm going to give everybody a few moments to select which one this is, and then we'll share the results with the team to see who we've got on the line. It's interesting that many of the principles we're going to talk about apply regardless of the type of territory you have, because at the end of the day, we're talking about goal setting and time management. And regardless of the type of rep you are, keys to our success are going to lie in some of the skill sets around that. But interestingly enough, 55% of you cover some sort of a geography. So you're looking for ideal prospects in a specific area, whether that's a state, a county, a zip code, or some subset of that. We do have a few people from global accounts, so interestingly enough that we'll look at this from how I manage a territory when I'm calling on those big global multinational entities. And then we've got named accounts as our second most segment, if you will. So interesting that we've got a breadth of expertise, and welcome channel partners as well that are adding some specific vertical or industry expertise to their partners in the sales. So let's get into what preparing a territory management plan and strategy looks like. And we're going to start off by looking at two aspects of goal setting. Number one, who is our ideal prospect and how do we identify them? And number two, how many of them do I actually need to find, and how am I going to chunk out the activities to find them in order to be successful for whatever the planning horizon is that I am looking at. And some organizations that I work with are looking at a 90-day territory plan. Others are looking at an annual territory plan and chunking out the activities in that horizon. The mechanics of the plan will be the same regardless of the time frame that you're looking to execute and manage this plan. And territory management, to a certain extent, is creating that compass for yourself so that you are pointed in the right direction and doing the right things to hit your goal. So let's talk about goal setting. And we go through a reverse engineering exercise with our clients when we are starting to look at what our goals are. And the purpose of this reverse engineering exercise is to identify how big does my pipeline have to get? How many new prospects do I need to be introducing into my pipeline every day, every week, every month, every quarter to ultimately achieve both my short and my long-term goals? And once we identify what that means, we can start to chunk out and better manage our calendars to make sure the activities that we are prioritizing around are enabling us to hit those goals. So, for example, I would start by looking at my quota. So if my quota is $1 million, I am going to fill in that top template with that number. Then I'm going to look at, what are the average size of the deals that I sell? And most of our clients have some metric for the type of rep and the type of territory that you have. What is that average order value? Some clients call it AOV, or average size of the opportunity. And you can look at your history. You can work with your manager and say, ideally, what is the average transaction in the historically that you could use as that gauge. And then you just do some simple math. If my average transaction is $20,000 and my quota is $1 million, how many transactions do I need to have to be successful in that time period? In the example that I'm using, it would be 50. And then I want to look at, okay, if I'm going to close 50 deals, how many do I have to have ideally in my pipeline based on my win ratio? If I know I win 1 out of 2 deals, and I need 50, I better find 100. If your win ratio is less than that or greater than that, that can help you gauge how big does this pipeline have to be? How many different opportunities do I need to develop over time? And that identifies what I'm looking for in a total number of qualified prospects. Those are those prospects where we're actually driving towards a decision. They're not just the meetings I'm going to have, but really where I've developed an opportunity to get to that level. And if I have 100 opportunities that I'm trying to develop, I might identify that there's 3x that, 3 times that I actually need to engage in. So if my pipeline ratio is 3x to what I think those qualified prospect formulas, now that says over that time period, I need to find 300 new opportunities. And I want to now start to look at that and chunk out that activities. The probability that I'm going to get 300 new prospects on day 1 of my landing in a territory is slim. But I can start to say, okay, if I'm going to get 300 prospects ultimately this year, I'm going to shoot to get 30 every month. And if I'm going to get 30 every month, that means I want to find 7 every week or 8 every week. And what are the activities then that I can make sure and hold myself accountable to drive that relevant activity? And this is a wonderful exercise to go through. Go through with as an individual, go through if you've got teammates that you work with, if you're a global account or a key account, and really identify, are we crystal clear on the type of activity that we need to do to generate the pipeline to be successful? And if my goal isn't just to achieve quota, but it's to overachieve and exceed quota, I can now set my stretch goals from this as well. But this goal setting exercise is a critical first component to identify how many I've got to go and find. Once I've gone through this, and I'm just kind of walking through some of the math that I walked you through, and when you download these slides, you can see this template and how you can walk yourself through that. I can now identify how I am going to spend my time, which leads into time management. So we talked about goal setting. Time management is critical to that because I want to make sure that how I spend my time is supporting the overall goals I set to be successful in my territory. So if I am spending, if I have an aggressive goal to generate 7 to 8 new opportunities every week in my pipeline, I need to make sure that I'm doing the right things to do that. And I need to look at my time. If, on the other hand, I look at my calendar and 75% of my time is either spent with administrative tasks, non-selling activities, customer service, or customer maintenance, I am going to be right out of the gates at risk to identify those new opportunities because I'm just going to run out of time to prospect and open the doors of those new accounts. The tool that we suggest that our clients use for this is a master time allocation. And we suggest that you really look down, and sometimes this time has to be negotiated with management and say, where do I need to spend my time? In the example that we've been working on, I think I probably need to be dedicating 50 to 60% of my total working week to generating new opportunities. So that's identifying prospects, prospecting, getting appointments, meeting with new potential buyers, and beginning the qualification process. I'm then going to take the balance of that 40% and say, what are the other things that I need to do? At the end of the day, there are some administrative tasks that have to be done. My employer expects it to get done. How am I going to allocate that time? And when I have that master time allocation set up, then I can manage that with discipline. And the key to that is when something comes up that's urgent and important that cuts into your prospecting time, that you swap that time out in a week horizon or a month horizon. You don't eliminate that block of time. It allows you to stay on track. So if I have dedicated that mornings between 8 and 10 is when I pound the phones and pound email and work to open doors and set up new appointments, and something lands on my desk at 8:30 that I have to do, I'm not going to just stop prospecting that day. I am going to take that block of time and reallocate it somewhere else in my calendar. And it allows me to stay on track with that time allocation. So goal setting, time management, and now this whole concept of segmentation. Who is in our territory and how do we identify where we're going to spend time with them? So for most of us, we have something defined that's our territory. It might be the universe of businesses or consumers or manufacturing companies in a specific area. And that universe is kind of this, this list of companies that exist. We want to, from that list, identify the suspects, people that would be likely to do business with us in order to move them through our funnel. So let's look at how do we start to segment our suspects and our prospects to really get into knowing who we need to identify. And there are lots of ways to target and segment your clients. We can look at how we segment our install base. I used to have named accounts years ago when I was a territory rep working in Boston, selling research services. And I would take at the beginning of the year all of my accounts and map out all of our solutions and identify the gaps. Where are there potential opportunities because they're not buying something from me that I think they should buy? And then I would use that gap analysis to back into, okay, who would be the likely targeted person that I would want to talk about to see what's going on in their part of the business and see if there might be an opportunity. A colleague of mine that sat right next door to me was a territory rep. So I had a finite list of named accounts. She had everything else in the state that we were calling on, which happened to be Massachusetts, that was in a specific industry. They were what we called vendor accounts. So they were providers of information technology, hardware, software, and to a certain extent services, but at that time it was mostly hardware and software. So she was segmenting her universe by industry. And then looking at that, who are the software companies? Who are the hardware companies? And what's going on in those companies so that I could identify where I should be spending my time. Looking at who are the hot startups versus who are the established vendors and identifying the segmentation by that. But you're going to want to look at your base and say, where are the likely ways to segment that marketplace? And then I'm going to suggest that beyond just the demographic or the situational or circumstantial segmentation that you're going to look at, we're going to start to look at how we create what we call kind of a buying frenzy. How do we create excitement for our products and services within those universe? How do we take that universe and get hooks to create suspects that ultimately will become prospects? A suspect to me, a universe to me was the names of the companies that I could call on. A suspect to me was a name of an individual and a phone number maybe or an email address in that company. So it was a heartbeat. It was somebody that I might be able to talk to. A prospect to me was somebody that I was starting to engage with. We were having a dialogue. Wherever that dialogue was going, to see if we might be able to create then a qualified prospect, which was someone who had the need, could justify the decision, the power to buy, and a timeline to buy. And that's what a qualified prospect was. So I want to really focus on how do I create this buying frenzy? And what are some of the situations that help people to do that? And here at Value Selling, we talk about two things to do that. Number one, who can we use as a reference sell of an existing customer or a recent sale to use as create a story, a credibility introduction, or a customer testimonial that we can leverage to gain access to that. The other thing we want to do is really start to think about what are the profiles of these companies. And we don't want to just look at the demographics of that company or the situation of that company. We want to identify what are the issues and problems facing that company that we, as a sales rep, can add value to. And then create those reference stories around that and use that to be our credibility introduction to try to gain access and interest in engaging for us. So, for example, we want to talk about how we've helped companies improve their sales productivity. If I'm selling value selling framework and associated services, I'm talking about how we drive sales productivity with tools and skills and management process toward that effect. I'm not talking about the fact that I have a suite of training products. I'm talking about the issues and problems that I could address for them. And thinking about your messaging as a way to enter the door can be really, really powerful as you approach your territory. What are the similar issues and problems that the companies and the individuals that you're trying to gain access to are likely to be facing? Who owns resolution of those issues and problems? And how do I identify those people so that I can put together a plan of attack to gain access, validate their decision-making process, maintain access, and ultimately close them? And it's a different type of segmentation that many of our clients aren't used to doing. They're used to looking at, I'm looking for companies with 50 to 100 employees, or I'm looking for manufacturing companies that have a certain type of technology in place so that I can go and talk about how to enhance that technology. We're not necessarily looking at issues and problems. We're looking at circumstances. And we're going to suggest that segmentation needs to go beyond circumstances. So what does that mean? So once I've identified what that criteria is, what that segmentation is, now how do I go find the customers? Well, there's a ton of resources that we can go to get that information. And depending on the nature of your territory, here's a couple of examples that you might want to think about. What is the local business press? If I'm a territory rep, is there a local business journal, a local chamber that I could get lists or access to business? I live in San Diego. We have a San Diego business journal that is always highlighting comings and goings of executives, companies that are getting funding, companies that are moving or exiting the area, so that I can find those. Industry associations. If I am looking for specific companies in a specific vertical, are there industry groups? Are there trade associations where I might be able to go find those companies? Find the local companies that might fit that criteria. Your own customers may have great, or your own company may have great information. Are there companies that used to do business with you? Is there other internal data? Does your marketing organization have some information that you could get from them in terms of internal data, or partners? If you're a channel partner, can you go to your vendor and your territory partners and get information from them? Social networking certainly in today's world is becoming one of the go-to places to prospect and find contacts and get referrals and introductions through social networking and online and offline. As a matter of fact, next month that will be our topic of our webinar, and I'll give you some more details on that later. But what can you be doing for LinkedIn? I've got one of my sales reps here at Value Selling who has set a goal for herself that every day she is reaching out to 6 new people, asking for 6 new introductions using LinkedIn. And she's holding herself accountable to that metric. And I can tell you that the pipeline she's building and the activities that she has to meet people and talk about their issues and problems and identify other people that she should be talking to is tremendous. She has built a very active and qualified pipeline in a very short period of time by being very specific and holding herself accountable to social media, LinkedIn in particular, networking, and connections. So we want to build that list. Then we want to start to prioritize those companies. You and I both all know that not every single prospect is equal in terms of where we want to be investing our time. So we want to look at that list that we're building and start to prioritize which ones we're going after first and which ones are the ones that are most likely to engage with us. Some of the criteria that people have used in the past is, hey, where's my competition installed? If I know I have a weak competitor in a certain area, can I identify in my territory where they're installed and go see if those particular buyers and customers might be looking for an alternative? I might be looking at the health of certain companies. If I know that my solution is ideal for companies that are in huge cost-cutting mode or cost savings mode or are struggling financially, then that might be a fit. So I want to really prioritize those. I talk about geography. I also want to cluster some of those. So I know if I'm going to North County here in San Diego and I have an appointment, where are the other target customers in that area that I should be targeting so that I'm not driving an hour for one appointment, but I'm scheduling my time and driving 1 hour and hopefully securing 3, 4, 5 appointments back to back from that perspective. And we can start to look at where those different priorities should be and what that criteria is for you to really allocate on that. And then our goal is to get in the door, right? How do we get in the door? Once we've got this great plan and we've identified where we should be spending our time, what our goals are, and making sure that's aligned, who our segments are and our priorities are, now we focus on getting in the door. And we can start to now refine that plan on our success to hit the goals and objectives that we set out for ourselves in that goal setting part. So what does that mean? We talk about launching campaigns. And the campaign in this is, we're in the U.S. at least in a political campaign season, is not like a political campaign in any way, shape, or form, but it is a formal plan to gain access to an individual that we don't have access to today. So what does that mean? Well, often it's kind of that 1-2 punch of an email and a voicemail attack. We know that voicemail is harder and harder to get through, but I don't believe we can ignore it. I'm even seeing companies go more to video cards and video introductions as ways to launch this campaign. But the messaging is what I want to talk about here. What goes into the message that you are sending to a person asking for the appointment? Well, one of the things that we believe is, can we overwhelm that prospect with what we call AIM, anxiety, influence, and motivation? And that's why these campaigns have to be very customer specific. This isn't a blanket email to 55 people with the same exact content. This is me identifying, I want to talk to Jean Smith. And who is Jean? What do I know about Jean? What do I know about her company? And what might be some of the triggers that would compel her to take a meeting with me? And when I'm doing it that way, I can craft those messages accordingly. Then I focus around the real issues and value that I can talk about. These campaign messages end up being about the prospect, not about us. And going back to what I talked about of segmenting the customers and creating some customer success stories around the issues and problems that we addressed for them, are the foundation for some of the content that's going to go into this campaign. And then really focusing this message on them, not you. I get a lot of requests for people to sell stuff to me. It's great market research for the job that I'm in. So many of those emails almost read like blah, 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 because they tell me who they are in terms of features and functionality. We are the best company with XYZ product. And they don't ever address the why I would want to talk to them in the first place. And the whole key to value selling is to identify the issues and problems that have enough value in resolving them to motivate someone to act. So we talk about this campaign, and in 2015 we had a webinar that is recorded and on our website that really goes into the details of how you craft these messages and a template for that. So if you want to visit our website and see that in the past, you can go do that. And then, as I said, we're going to take that messaging, and anything we can do to get referrals and references of looking at that your territory plans are important too. We call this warming up the cold call. I don't think we're the only ones that call that. But what can we do to get introduced to someone so that this campaign is not purely unsolicited? Cold calling is harder than ever today because there's so many of us out there doing it, and there's so many reasons to not take a meeting with a sales executive. I often tell the story that wouldn't it be great if everybody that we wanted to target as a potential client was just sitting around at their desk every day with nothing to do, hoping that a sales rep would give them a call and ask for some time. So leveraging that network and leveraging those referrals from your customers and prospects are very key to gaining access as well. So let me summarize a little bit of what we've talked about today. And again, the whole theme of this territory management summary was to talk about a process to set your goals so that you could identify the amount of activity needed to meet your goals and exceed your goals. We then went into really talking about time management and how we can make sure that what we're doing is aligned to those goals. So often I work with sales reps and they tell me what their goals are, and then I say, okay, let's look at your calendar and see when you're going to get that done. And their calendar is booked solid with activities that don't support those goals. So we need to renegotiate that. And as professionals in the sales profession, we need to hold ourselves accountable for making sure that we are proactively managing as much of our time as possible, knowing that there are always going to be some uncontrollables out there. There's always going to be an issue that comes up with a customer or an issue that comes up with our management that we have to address. But if we can be as proactive as possible, we are going to be more likely to achieve our goals than less likely. And then identifying how to segment our customers, identify those ideal customers, find them, find data on them, find the information, build the lists, and then launch the campaigns to turn those suspects, those names, phone numbers, and heartbeats into prospects that we can engage and ultimately advance, qualify, and close those real sales. And one thing that I would add to this is, how do we revisit this? At the end of each week, at the end of each month, do we have a process in place to reflect on our ability to achieve those goals and what worked, so that we can fine-tune and change our plan moving forward? So building in the time for reflection and understanding of what's worked and what needs to change is a critical component for territory management as well. This is not an event. This is an ongoing process. And likely some of the goals and the parameters of the assumptions that you make in January, by the time you get to even April, you'll have greater insight. Were those goals and assumptions realistic? Was the time management, master time allocation, realistic? Do I need to go back and renegotiate some things, either with my manager or another team member? Are there things that I'm doing that I need to delegate if I can? And we can revisit all of that and adjust and revise accordingly. So make sure that we're building in that reflection time. So I'm going to be happy to take some questions, and if you've got them, please share them in your Q&A tab. I also want to share with you a few things. Later this afternoon, you can go to our website, and under Resources and Webinars, you'll find today's slides as well as a recording of today's session. If you want to watch it again or share it with a colleague, please feel free to access it that way. In addition, we've got a tremendous amount of resources available on ValueSelling.com that I want to share with you. So please visit that. Before I go to questions, I do want to share with you one thing that is coming up while you're all still on the phone. I am going to be speaking at the Value Summit. It's the Value Selling and Realization Summit that is put on by the Value Selling Realization Council, which is an independent organization made up of a number of different companies where they're trying to bring some standards and some discipline to their client members around value selling. The really fun part about presenting at this conference this year is we're going to be presenting in partnership with a client of ours, Adobe, about the tremendous success that they have had with the value selling framework across their entire enterprise of driving value conversations with their customers and how that is really creating breakthrough results. So I just wanted to share that with you. I would love to see you there if you're available to go to that conference, All Around Value, coming up. So let's go back to the questions. Let me see what we've got questions here. One of the questions I'm seeing here had to do with the segmentation and what if data is not available? Well, I think what you're asking for is how do we get data if we don't have it available internally? That's where we need to get creative and really know what we're looking for. So first of all, I would go through the prioritization and segmentation exercise of what are the key companies that we're looking for, and then identify where do I find them? Is it going to likely be an industry resource? Is it going to be geographic resources? Where are those companies? Are there trade associations that you can participate in and that you can join where key people from those industries are participating in those trade industries? So those would be some of the areas. But there's got to be ways to identify who those companies are, and we just need to get creative at finding them. One of the other questions had to do with how do you identify the average transaction size and some of the metrics that would go into a goal-setting exercise. I would work with your management and ask and go through it collaboratively. I would also get buy-in from your management. So if I'm going through that exercise and I identify the number of prospects that I need to find, I want to collaborate with my management and say, if this is what I have to do to be successful, how do we manage all these other activities or tasks that are on my plate? I'm working with an organization right now that is going through an exercise to do that, just that. They have found that their inside sales organization has become so focused on customer service issues that they are no longer proactively creating new opportunities. So once management became aware of that was the reason productivity was falling, they then could reallocate, delegate, and reorganize around taking those customer service issues away from the salespeople and managing them in a customer service environment to free up the salespeople for time. So that was very, very successful for those clients. I will also let you know that if you haven't had a chance to join us on LinkedIn or Facebook, please do so. And if you have any comments on today's webinar, please tweet us at ValueSelling, ValueSelling, and I'll be on our Twitter account later today answering any further questions that you might have on territory management. So would love to interact with you on Twitter from that perspective. Before we wrap up, let me just share with you on February 18th, we are going to be talking about this whole concept of social selling and how to use social networks to open doors. We talk here at Value Selling that the key to social selling is using the online platforms to get offline and have a conversation. So that will be the key tactics and strategies that we'll be talking about on February 8th, and hope that you're able to join us on that. Last but not least, thank you for joining us. Appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to focus on the key skills that you need to focus on to be successful in 2016. This deck, as I said, will be available later, and the templates that I reviewed in here will also be in here later. So you'll be able to download those from our website. If you have any other questions, please use Twitter or reach out to me directly. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody, and I look forward to talking to you again in February. Take care.